23rd century Star Trek fandom had evolved from a loose association of nerds with skin problems into a full-blown religion.
And Scotty beamed them to the Klingon ship, where they would be no tribble at all.
All power to the engines.
As country after country fell under its influence, world leaders became threatened by the movement's power. And so the Trekkies were executed in the manner most befitting virgins.
He's dead, Jim. He's dead, Jim. He's dead, Jim.
Finally, the sacred texts were banned.
The last copies of the 79 episodes and 6 movies were dumped on the forbidden world Omega-3, along with that blooper reel where the door doesn't close all the way.
All right, hello. Welcome back to another Classic Comics live stream. All right, so today, going to be starting on Season 2. Going to be taking a look at Spectre of the Gun today. Let's look, we got some comments here. Hello, Rogues1138. Hail to you, sir. Thanks for being here. Church of Trek, yeah, I always find that one pretty funny. And Space 1999, yeah, the eagle there, firing the missile. And hey, Gwagnar's here. Hello, Gwagnar. Thanks for stopping by, man. Okay. So, and I think I said on the previous stream, like, this is one of my favorite episodes, actually, and definitely one of my favorite of Season 3. And I guess that's because it was one of the first ones I saw. You know, my first episode was actually Arena. But, you know, when it was in syndication back in the 70s, they didn't show these things necessarily in order, you know, so they would show them out of order. And I think, you know, in the first handful of episodes I saw after Arena, this was one of them. Now, this is episode 56 in production order, and I am going in production order, not in order of broadcast. And as always, I'll be reading from These Are the Voyages by Mark Cushman for behind-the-scenes information on the production of the episode. All right, so I guess we'll just go ahead and jump into it here. Now, this episode was written by Gene Kuhn, although he did it under the alias of Lee Cronin. And I'll explain that when I get into the production stuff after covering the episode. And directed by Vincent McAveety. All right, so we start off with the Enterprise. The Enterprise is approached by a kind of alien space buoy of unknown origin. They try to change course to avoid it, but it moves with them and it keeps staying in their path no matter how they're moving. Now, finally, they come to a stop near the probe, and a voice speaks to them, telling them that they have encroached upon the territory of the Melkotians, and tells them to turn back immediately. Now, the crew realize that they are hearing this voice in their head, basically, because each one of them is hearing it in their native language. Kirk in English, Spock in Vulcan, Chekhov in Russian, etc. Kirk notes that their orders are to establish contact with the Melkots or Melkotians at all costs. For some reason, don't know why it's so important, and he is reluctant to turn back. He asks Spock what is known about the Melkotians, and Spock basically says not much. So Kirk replies to the buoy. If I can get on here. Oh, sorry, hit the wrong thing. So he replies to the buoy, explaining that they are from a peaceful alliance of planets and that they only want to make peaceful contact, etc., etc. And there is no response from the buoy. So Kirk decides, that's good enough. And so they bypass the buoy and they fly on to Melkot. Now they beam down to the planet, and when they get there, they find themselves in this area surrounded by some kind of a mist or fog, and they don't seem to be where they're supposed to be. So they decide to beam back up, but when Kirk tries to hail the Enterprise with his communicator, there is no response, and Spock notes that his tricorder is also not operating. Then they hear a voice, and they are confronted by a Melkotian who looks, I don't know, kind of like a head of cauliflower. And they are told that since they ignored the warning, that they are going to be executed. And since the warning was defied on Kirk's orders, he will decide the manner of their demise. They then suddenly vanish. And, oh, well, I'm sorry, but first Kirk warns that they can defend themselves if they need to. Then they appear in what appears to be a facsimile of a town in the Old West. And their Starfleet gear is gone. Their communicators, tricorders gone, and their phasers have been replaced by 6-shooters. Now, a newspaper tells them that they are in a representation of Tombstone, Arizona, circa 1881. Here we go. And Kirk wonders why this time and place. And Spock observes that the Melkotian said he would determine the manner of their deaths, and Kirk suggests that they probed his mind and drew on his knowledge of this time period to choose it. Then the town sheriff arrives, and he refers to Kirk as Ike and refers to Spock as Frank and the others to Tom and Billy, etc. Kirk asks the sheriff if he knows them, and the sheriff finds this to be very amusing. And he walks away laughing, mentioning that his name is Sheriff Bean. And when Kirk hears the name Sheriff Bean, then he realizes or puts the puzzle together and realizes what's going on. He realizes that they're in some sort of simulation of Tombstone, Arizona on the day of the shootout at the OK Corral, which took place between the Clanton gang and Wyatt Earp and his brothers. And then they realize they are in the role of the Clantons. And if history plays out the same way, they will all be killed by the Earps. Then they hear a crashing sound, and a chair comes flying out of a nearby saloon. A man comes staggering out, and then he is shot and killed. Now they approach to check on the man, and the shooter, who's wearing a badge, retreats back into the saloon. McCoy checks the man and says that, he's dead, Jim. And they realize that death is real in this place. So then they enter the saloon, and Chekhov is immediately approached by a saloon girl named Sylvia, who calls him Billy. And she takes them to a table and tells them that they're taking a terrible chance coming into the saloon with Morgan Earp. That's the man who shot the other guy earlier in the saloon as well. Let's see here. Now, Kirk looks at him, and when Kirk does, Morgan approaches and appears about to draw his gun. And then Spock warns Kirk that he should probably just go ahead and take a seat. Otherwise, he's likely to wind up in a duel with this guy, and he probably doesn't want that. So they decide to have a seat. But then Morgan approaches them. He doesn't like that Sylvia is all over Chekhov and basically tells her to get away from him. Chekhov takes exception to this and tries to confront Morgan, but then Kirk steps in and tells them that they don't want any trouble. And Morgan basically says there's already trouble, and then he retreats and leaves the saloon. Now, the crew ponder their situation, realizing that Morgan has gone to warn his brothers that the Clanton gang is in town and that they will all be killed at the OK Corral at 5 p.m. this afternoon. Now, Kirk tries to convince the bartender, Ed, and Chekhov, by the way, is not really having a problem since he's got this girl pretty much all over him. And he tries to convince the bartender, Ed, that he's not really Ike Clanton. They aren't really Ike Clanton and all the Clanton gang and all that. But Ed just finds this all hilarious and just kind of laughs it off all as some kind of elaborate joke. So then realizing that's not going to work, he goes to see Wyatt Earp in Wyatt Earp's office. There he meets Wyatt and Virgil Earp as well. And he tries to diffuse the situation and tell them they don't want any trouble and they're not looking, they don't want to have a shootout with him or anything. But the Earps just aren't having it. You know, they're pretty much like, get out of town. You know, if you're here after 5 p.m., you're dead. You know, that's basically it. If you're here after 5 p.m., we're going to kill you. And so Kirk, realizing that this isn't going to work, leaves and goes back to the saloon. Let's see. Yeah, okay. So now Kirk wonders if they could perhaps construct a phaser, but Spock says that that is pretty much impossible. They just don't have the materials or the technology available in this time period to do anything like that, so that isn't going to work. Meanwhile, Chekhov and the saloon girl, Sylvia, they're talking again, and she warns Chekhov, or Billy, because she thinks he is Billy Claiborne, is who she thinks he is, warns him that he needs to get out of town, otherwise the Earps are going to kill him. And, you know, Chekhov kind of dismisses her concerns, saying that people have tried to kill him before, you know, I've survived, I'm still here, et cetera, et cetera. He's not worried, you know, basically giving her plenty of youthful bravado. At that point, Kirk decides that they're just going to exercise the better part of valor and just flee the town. So they head to the city limits. But when they get to the city limits, they find that there's a force field in place and they can't leave town even if they want to. They're trapped there. Then they hear a clock tolling 3 o'clock and realize they're running out of time. So Kirk asks, well, if we can't construct a phaser, what else can we do? What is available to us here? And they hit on the idea basically of constructing a gas grenade, some kind of anesthetic gas, I guess, that they can use to maybe incapacitate the Earps, or at least slow them down and give them a chance against the in the shootout. Now, Dr. McCoy says he knows where to go to get the kind of chemicals they're going to need to do something like that. So he takes off, and Kirk sends Chekhov and Scotty on some errands to get materials. Now, McCoy goes to the dentist's office in town, and there's a man there and another man in a chair. So he addresses the man who's standing and saying, you know, mind if I borrow some of these chemicals? Now, turns out the man who's standing is actually the town barber, and it's the guy in the chair who is the dentist. So McCoy asks him, and of course, the guy in the chair turns out to be Doc Holliday. And basically, Holliday tells him that, you know, sure, you can go ahead and take them. They're not going to do you any good because at 5 o'clock, you and the others are all going to be dead men. And he even pulls a shotgun on McCoy to make his point. He kind of laughs at the whole thing and then tells McCoy to take the drugs and clear out, which McCoy does, wisely enough. Okay, now, meanwhile, after Chekhov's run his errand, he bumps into Sylvia. And they talk. And she mentions that she's making a new dress. And she can't wait to show it to him. And then she also ponders if they might be able to get married one day. And of course, Chekhov, who's quite been enjoying her attention, but at this point, he's kind of like, look, I'm sorry, but that's just not going to be possible. And then again, they're confronted by Morgan Earp, who basically takes Sylvia and drags her away from him. But also he punches Chekhov and decks him. So then Chekhov gets back up and he confronts Morgan. And then Morgan shoots him. Now Spock and the Kirk and the others, they hear the shot and they come running. And unfortunately, it turns out Chekhov is dead. Give me a moment here. I need to take a drink of water. Okay. Now the other Earps arrive, and they basically are ready to just go right now. Basically saying, go ahead, draw your guns. And Scotty, for one, is ready to do it, but Kirk says, no, 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 we don't want any trouble. So they back down. Now, later at the saloon, Kirk basically is kind of blaming himself for Chekhov's death, saying that he was the one, it was his choice to defy the Melkotian's warning and come to the planet anyway. And, he's agonizing over this and wondering maybe he shouldn't have done it. And McCoy tells Kirk that, look, he was just doing as he was ordered. He can't blame himself. Chekhov, he was a member of Starfleet. He knew there was danger. He knew the risks, et cetera, et cetera. You can't blame yourself for this. Then Spock observes that they really need to be more focused on trying to solve their current dilemma and not worrying about Chekhov. And of course, the others don't really appreciate Spock's dismissive attitude about Chekhov's death. And McCoy and Scotty both kind of scold him for being rather insensitive. And then the clock chimes 4 o'clock. And again, they've only got an hour left. They're running out of time. Then Spock observes that Chekhov, he had been placed in the role of Billy Claiborne, who took part in the shootout at the OK Corral. But according to history, Billy Claiborne wasn't killed. He survived the gunfight. And yet Chekhov is already dead before the gunfight's even taken place. And so they realize that, they're not necessarily constrained to play out historical events. They can change the course of these events. And Spock suggests that they try to negotiate with the Earps, but Kirk says he's already tried that. That isn't going to work. But he says there may be someone else that he may be able to appeal to. So Kirk goes to Sheriff Bean and tries to get Sheriff Bean to intervene and stop the shootout. But Bean argues that he and most of the town hate the Earps and they want them gone, and encourages Kirk and the others to kill them, suggesting maybe they ambush them or something like that. And basically they get into an argument and Kirk keeps reiterating, you need to stop this. You need to step in, and Bean again and again refusing until eventually Kirk just realizes it's just not going to work and this guy's not going to cooperate. So he goes back to the saloon again. And at this point, Spock and McCoy have finished up their gas grenade. Now, Kirk asks if they've had a chance to test it, and they admit that they haven't. And Kirk wants a field test of the grenade beforehand. And so Scotty offers to play the role of a guinea pig. And this was a nice little bit. So they're about to expose him to the gas, and then Scotty takes a quick shot of whiskey and says, "For the pain." And Spock observes that the gas is painless. And Scotty says, "Well, I guess you should have warned me." So they activate the grenade. And Scotty just, puts his face right in it and gets a good whiff. And nothing happens. It doesn't seem to work. And so Kirk is a bit miffed that the grenade didn't work, but Spock and McCoy both observe that it should have worked. It's basically just a simple chemical reaction, really. There's no reason why it wouldn't have worked. But they don't have time to ponder this matter any further because at this point it's now 4:50 p.m. They've only got 10 minutes. Now Kirk decides that they're going to just stay right there in the saloon and they're not going to go anywhere near the OK Corral until well after 5 o'clock. And then, poof, they're immediately in the OK Corral. And again, they try to leave. They try to flee the corral, but again, the place is surrounded by a force field. And again, they're trapped in the corral, just like they're trapped in the town. Now they realize that they're just going to have to stand and fight. Scotty, for one, is pleased at this because he's sick of running and hiding. But Spock observes that fighting them may not be necessary. He posits that they are behaving as everything around them, including the guns and the bullets, are all real. But they are actually created by the Melkotians, and it's possible that this is all just an illusion. They react as if these things are real instinctively, but if they accept that these things are in fact illusions, then they may be able to avoid dying because of them. Spock suggests that that's what really killed Chekhov, not the gun and the bullets, but rather Chekhov's belief that he would be killed. However, he also says they must be completely convinced that the bullets won't kill them. And McCoy argues that that's impossible. There's always going to be some measure of doubt. And so then Captain Kirk suggests that they undergo a mind meld, and Spock will implant a suggestion or compulsion in their mind, convincing them that, yes, this stuff is all illusion and it can't hurt us. Now, as they're about to begin, the clock strikes 5. And I love this whole sequence here that plays out because the clock strikes 5. Then we cut to Wyatt and Virgil Earp leaving Wyatt's office. Then we cut to Spock melding with Scotty and him telling Scotty that, these things are all illusions. They're just shadows. They have no substance. They cannot hurt us. And Wyatt and Virgil are joined by Morgan. Then they cut to Spock melding with McCoy. And then finally, the Earps are joined by Doc Holliday. And then we see Spock mind melding with Kirk. So the Earps and Holliday advance on the OK Corral. And they confront Kirk and the others. And they demand that Kirk and the others draw their weapons. They don't initially. Then Kirk puts his hand on his weapon, and then the Earps and Doc Holliday just open fire on him. And we have this kind of cool little scene here where, they obviously put the squibs or the, I don't know what you call them, explosive bits into this paneling behind them. So it looks like the bullets are going right through them and riddling this fence right behind them. Hold on just a moment. Man, I have to sneeze, but I can't sneeze. It's getting frustrating. And I felt kind of sorry for the actors because there's obviously these wind machines that are going really hard, and they're firing these guns which are releasing, these big puffs of sulfuric smoke, and every time they shoot, the wind is blowing it right back in their faces. But they exhaust their guns, and of course, Kirk and the others aren't harmed. Then Kirk and Wyatt get into a brief fist fight. Kirk gets the better of Wyatt, and he draws his gun, and it looks like he may shoot Wyatt. But then Kirk casts his gun aside. And when he does that, Wyatt and the other Earps and Doc Holliday all disappear. And then just like that, they're back on the Enterprise. And Chekhov is alive as if nothing had ever happened. All right. Now they are contacted by the Melkotians, who question or observe that he did not kill his opponent, when he had the chance. And the Melkotian asks, "Is this the way of your kind?" And Spock assures them that yes, that they have only come in peace and only want to establish, friendly relations and learn about one another, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then the Melkotian gives them permission to approach their planet. After the Melkotian disappears and they head for the planet, Spock asks Kirk if he wanted to kill Wyatt Earp earlier. And Kirk admits that, yeah, for a minute there he did. And Spock wonders how humanity was able to survive this long and not destroy themselves. And Kirk states that humans eventually overcame their instinct to use violence and killing to solve problems. Spock doesn't really seem convinced. I mean, he looks pretty skeptical to me. He's just kind of like, yeah, sure. Whatever you say, Captain. And it ends there. Okay. That. Let me get back here. Okay. All right. So, and I do give this episode, I give it an A-. And there aren't going to be many A's in this season. I'll just say that right off. But yeah, I really like this episode. I remember as a kid, just really being gripped by this one. I think a big part of it is the casting of the actors to play the Earps and Doc Holliday. They're just really good. And, it's not like they do a whole lot. They mostly just stand around looking menacing. I don't know. There's just something about them. It's the difference. One of the differences between actors back then and today. Some of them still were like rough looking and stuff like that. And so many actors in Hollywood, they just don't really have that look anymore. Actually, I think, where do I have it? Yeah, here it is. Yeah, just look at that shot of them there. I mean, they just look like they give no shits at all. In fact, as I was reading this and going through it, it kind of, at first I thought that maybe this episode was influenced by Westworld, but actually Westworld was in 73, so it's actually about 5 years after this. So maybe Westworld was influenced by this. I don't know. Maybe this is where Michael Crichton got the idea for the episode. Cold-blooded, yeah. Yeah, and I mean these guys, they were veterans of a lot of westerns, so I'm sure they'd played a lot of, bandits and rustlers and stuff like that. Okay, so let's kind of get into this one here. I'm reading from Mark Cushman now. So this is from TV Guide, October 19th, 1968. Spectre of the Gun, Actually, let me dive out of there. All right, Spectre of the Gun. An eerie punishment awaits the men of the Enterprise for violating Melkotian space. They are made to appear as the Clanton Gang in Tombstone, Arizona on October 26, 1881. If history is correct, they will be met and killed by the Earps and Doc Holliday at the OK Corral. Stylized see-through sets and the lawmen's funereal black costumes heighten the dreamlike aura of this episode. The Earps are like walking death. Again, yeah, kind of like Westworld or like a Terminator, kind of like a Terminator. They are there for one purpose, to kill the Clantons. Attempts by the Enterprise crew to leave Tombstone are stopped by a force field. And then, while protecting a pretty saloon girl, Chekhov is shot and killed by one of the Earps. No matter how fragmented these specters from the past seem, they also appear to be deadly. Rogue says, "What? There was an old Westworld TV show." Yeah. So Westworld was originally Westworld. Was it a novel first? I think it was a novel first. Let me check that, because the movie was written by Michael Crichton. Was that based on the movie? I'm trying to remember. Let me see here. No, okay, it wasn't. This was from a screenplay, an original screenplay that Crichton wrote. So it was a movie first, and then of course we had, and I think there was a TV show, a brief Westworld TV show back in the 70s. I don't think it ran very long. Let me see. Westworld TV. Westworld. Okay, come on. Come on now. Huh? No, I guess maybe there wasn't. I guess maybe there wasn't. There's just the more recent one. Yul Brynner. Yeah, Yul Brynner was in the movie. He was in the movie back in 73. One of his more famous roles. And again, he's kind of like a proto Terminator in that. Yul Brynner. I don't. Yeah. How was it? It's Yul Yul by Brynner. Yeah, kind of an odd name. But he was a pretty big actor around that time. Okay. So, in the book Boarding the Enterprise, author Eric Green wrote, "Even the title Spectre of the Gun speaks to being haunted by that which is not really there." Kuhn argues that it was not our history, but rather our beliefs that trap and condemn us, and that if the belief does not fit the facts, survival requires changing the belief. Changes were in full swing. In 1968, American government, its policies, and even its history were being challenged by a sector of the population. In particular, a large percentage of the young were doubtful of the information provided by the system. Gene Kuhn tuned into this, and the skepticism it bred, but added the belief of Roddenberry's that man can grow beyond his proclivity to destroy those he does not identify with. The Melkotians describe humankind as a disease from the outside, but Kirk knows, as did Kuhn, that man is capable of better. Kuhn had made his statement before in his first Star Trek script, Arena. There, Kirk's compassion, his humanity, wins the aliens over and creates the possibility of friendship. And we do see that very much reflected at the end of that. It does end very much like Arena. Kirk has the opportunity to kill an opponent, an enemy, and declines to do so. And these, kind of godlike aliens that are manipulating him decide that he doesn't have to be an enemy. Other elements written or produced by Kuhn in other episodes are also recycled here. The Enterprise is under orders to establish diplomatic relations with a planet, no matter the cost, just like in A Taste for Armageddon. A landing party wrestles with illusions conjured up by aliens, as in Catspaw. Chekhov dies, or appears to, as McCoy did or didn't in Shore Leave, and then Kirk did in Amok Time and Return to Tomorrow, and then as Scotty did in The Changeling. And in the Galileo 7, McCoy criticized Spock for lacking humanity when he suggested they focus on working to survive rather than taking time to pay respects to a fallen crew member. And that happens again. Kuhn always believed that if something worked, then, let it work again. We can forgive him for this. This episode's sci-fi Western premise is unique enough to withstand a whole wagon full of cliches. Not all fans of the series appreciate Spectre of the Gun, though. Some are not happy seeing their favorite show about the future go this far into the past. They do not care for the fragmented sets or the Grim Reaper persona of the Earps. Most, however, embrace the story's daringness, the episode's visually unique aspects, the eeriness, and the downright strangeness of the production. Spectre has flaws, certainly, and should not be regarded as a defining moment in the series. Nevertheless, this is television with purpose and style, and it's damn good fun. All right, let me take another drink of water here, right quick. All right. Now, a specter, according to Webster's dictionary, is a ghost, apparition, or any object of fear or dread. This episode, however, was originally titled Execution 1872. Gene Roddenberry was excited about the premise, and he wrote a memo to NBC. Quote, Star Trek Western. Kirk and Spock have alienated a vastly superior race whose mode of execution is to arrange an entertaining death from colorful history of the subjects. Relieved of all their futuristic gear and weapons, the Enterprise captain and his science officer must face the most vicious gunmen in Western history. Much of Roddenberry's excitement came from knowing Gene Kuhn would write the script. Gene 1 and Gene 2 may have butted heads over funny business in Star Trek, but that was not going to be an issue here. Roddenberry once again had the last say, giving out the story assignments and overseeing the rewriting of scripts. Kuhn's return as a writer, however, had to be handled discreetly and with a degree of deceit. Gene Kuhn's contract with rival studio Universal called for his exclusive services in writing scripts and at the same time serving as producer and head writer for the TV series It Takes a Thief. During the course of this assignment and future assignments, he would not visit the Paramount production offices. There would be no witnesses and no photographs and no Gene Kuhn. He wrote under the name Lee Cronin. Even interoffice memos referred to him as Cronin, never Kuhn, including those that came from Stan Robertson. NBC was apparently in cahoots with Star Trek and therefore an accomplice in the charade. So the operation kicked off in early March 1968. Roddenberry had already given 4 writing assignments to Dorothy Fontana and 2 to John Meredith Lucas. Then on March 6, after spending the morning with freelancer Edward J. Lasko and Trek veteran Theodore Sturgeon, assigning 1 story to each, Roddenberry sat down with Kuhn. At the end of the meeting, the mysterious Mr. Cronin had 6 stories assigned to him, more than anyone else for the 3rd season. The first one had the working title of Execution 1872. Both men knew that a better title would come to them. The date wasn't even right, as the OK Corral gunfight took place in 1881. 2 weeks later, on March 18th, when Kuhn returned to his story outline, or turned in his story outline, now called The Last Gunfight, Robert Justman knew that Roddenberry was having second thoughts about personally producing the third season. All indications were that the first chair producer's job would go to Bob Justman, and he was happy with the positive start that The Last Gunfight provided. In this early version, we begin with Kirk, Spock, McCoy, Scotty, and security officer Valentine enveloped in a foggy place Kuhn refers to as nowhere. They have trouble remembering how they came to this place, but after comparing recollections, agree that they had approached an unexplored star group to make contact with an alien race. Kirk, under orders, ignored warnings to stay away. Now, in this weird place, a tall and frightening looking alien appears before them. It identifies itself as the Orcat of Shawn. The Shawnians have isolated themselves from humans after intercepting ancient TV and radio signals from Earth. It is from these signals, news, and entertainment programs, 3 years in Earth's past, or 300 years in Earth's past, and the patterns of Kirk's mind that the Shawnians use to choose the surroundings and characters to carry out the execution of the unwelcome humans. This concept that late 20th century television programming would cause an alien race to feel threatened by humans was both clever and amusing at the time. It was classic Gene Coon. However, in 1968, the networks were under fire from activist groups and from government regulators regarding too much violence on TV. Back then, they thought there was too much violence. NBC, as with CBS and ABC, wanted to present a positive image of setting examples for America with its programming, not admitting or even demonstrating how entertainment shows depict men as violent and irrational. References to the Shawnians distrusting humans and believing them to be violent could stay, but blaming it on TV had to go. Many of Kuhn's original story elements made it to the televised episode. However, there were exceptions. Valentine, the security man, is impulsive and gung-ho, so much so that he makes an arbitrary decision to save the others while risking his own life. After a single lesson in the fast draw, he confronts the Earps and is shot dead. The Shawnians had cast Valentine as Billy Claiborne, but Spock recalls how the real Billy Claiborne didn't die in the actual gunfight at the OK Corral. This allows him to deduce that the pattern can be changed. The biggest difference between the first and final written versions of The Last Gunfight involved the ending. Knowing that the patterns can change and aware of the Old West code concerning dueling, Kirk decides to cheat. As the Earps and Doc Holliday approach the OK Corral, he and the others hide behind wagons. They refuse to show themselves when called out. Kirk tells Wyatt Earp their guns are trained on him and his deputies, and they will be shot down where they stand. The lawmen don't know how to react to this breach in dueling etiquette because the Shawnians don't know how to interpret Kirk going against his own mental patterns. It is not Kirk's nature to lie in ambush. The Shawnians decide from this apparent contradiction that Kirk is mad. The western town is suddenly replaced by a foggy world, and the Enterprise men, minus Valentine, once again face the Orcat. The Shawnians have come to a decision. Since humans are clearly insane, they cannot be held accountable for their actions. With this, Kirk and his men find themselves back on the Enterprise. With typical Coon humor, the Earthmen survive, but to Spock's amusement, with their pride barely intact. Okay, so obviously this was the initial version of the episode, and it would undergo a lot of rewrites, as most of these episodes do. I'm not going to go through all of it, but I'll touch on a few of the things. So, Coon's story outline sparked ideas in Bob Justman's mind. For the first time in the series, instead of just commenting on stories, he was finally in a position to develop the stories himself along with the writers. In his memo to Roddenberry, Justman wrote, quote, "We could use some action earlier in the show. Somewhere early in Act 1 would be my preference. Perhaps we could see the Earps dispose of an adversary before the astonished eyes of Kirk and the party." And of course, that becomes the scene where Morgan shoots the guy outside the saloon. Let's see. Now, days later, Justman was Okay, so Justman made some more suggestions. He was the one who suggested that they remove Valentine and replace him with Chekhov. So it was Justman's idea to put Chekhov in the episode. Let's see. So, quote, Chekhov should be used instead of Valentine. Resurrecting him at the end will not be a problem if the Shawnians make peace with the Enterprise. A girl should be provided for Chekhov, a dance hall girl who arouses his romantic chivalry. An insult by one of the Earps to his girl angers Chekhov into a challenge, and this is what gets him killed. And again, that's exactly what happens in the episode when he and Morgan have their confrontation. So he actually made a lot of suggestions for this episode, so much so that he was actually hoping to get maybe a co-writer credit or story writer credit, but that didn't happen. Days later, Justman was denied the writing credit, and Fred Freiberger was. And also, and as I mentioned last week, of course, he was also hoping to be the show's main producer, and thought he was going to be that. But then at the last minute, Roddenberry brought in Freiberger, much to his surprise. And so he did not get to be the main producer. Freiberger was the main producer. Now, Freiberger's reaction to the last gunfight was not favorable, and he sent word to Roddenberry that he had concerns about a sci-fi western. And then again, there were several memos, went back and forth, several rewrites. Everyone agreed that Shawnian sounded too much like an American Indian tribe, and so they needed to change the name, and that's how they became the Melkotians. Not agreeing with Justman's note. I'll skip that. Okay, now the story editor for the third season was Arthur H. Singer, and again, I mentioned him last week. Singer was new at Star Trek and had yet to learn that the story theme went deeper here than on nearly all other TV shows of the period. Kuhn had a better theme in mind anyway, that because history is distorted by memory, reality is merely a state of mind. His revised story outline, written for free and incorporating many of Justman and Roddenberry's suggestions, was dated April 19th. It didn't take long for Freiberger to warm to the episode, especially now that he knew how much his executive producer boss liked it and that Mr. Cronin was, in fact, Gene Kuhn. Now, Freiberger had been forewarned by Roddenberry and Justman that Stan Robertson, their NBC production manager, was very tough on story outlines, and that the Star Trek creative staff had come to believe he was incapable of comprehending the true potential for action and the intended pacing of a teleplay based solely on the descriptions given in outline form. For this reason, Freiberger placed a call to NBC and confided in Robertson that Star Trek had an opportunity to get some scripts from Gene Kuhn, but they would have to be written quickly before the commencement of production on the second season of It Takes a Thief. He also told Robertson that the code word for Kuhn in all memos would be Lee Cronin. To clinch this deal, Freiberger sent a note along with a story outline of the episode. Roddenberry and Freiberger were able to persuade Robertson to give network authorization for Kuhn to proceed to teleplay. To get this, they promised strong action adventure and a script giving clear indication that the Western elements were there to serve the science fiction story. Kuhn's first draft of the script was dated April 30th, 1968. This was the third script to come in for the new season. He had already delivered a first draft script for Spock's Brain, and Edward J. Lasko had sent in his first stab at the teleplay for And the Children Shall Lead. These two scripts were viewed as being somewhat problematic. Therefore, The Last Gunfight, in contrast, was considered to have much greater potential. Okay, now before I've mentioned Kellum DeForest Research, and so this was a research sort of think tank that Star Trek turned to, often to get the science right, to get scientific matters correct on the show. But it turns out they did cover other areas, and one of them was history. So Kellum DeForest research was also a tool for maintaining continuity and believability. And in this case, much continuity and believability pertain to historical facts concerning the gunfight at the OK Corral. For the most part, Gene Coon was faithful to historic records, but he had an agenda in how he wanted to see the Clantons and the Earps. In the late 1800s in Tombstone, Tombstone was the center of a political power struggle between two different branches of law enforcement. Well, two branches of law enforcement that were basically maybe kind of just also criminal operations, but who knows? Kind of depends on who you ask. County Sheriff Johnny Bean was friendly with the Clantons, who were local cowboys suspected of engaging in illegal activity. All disliked the Earps. Of this, Joan Pierce of DeForest Research wrote to Freiberger, quote, as portrayed in the script, Bean was allied with criminal groups in Arizona and was indicted by the Cochise County Grand Jury on May 24th, 1882. The alliance between the Clantons and Johnny Bean can be supported historically. Virgil Earp was appointed Marshal of Tombstone for the second time on June 25th, 1881. His brothers and Doc Holliday acted as his deputies. Wyatt Earp was a deputy United States Marshal. So the Earps, to the chagrin of Sheriff Bean, instated a gun ordinance in Tombstone, and any cowboys refusing to surrender their firearms upon entering the town were considered to be outlaws and subject to arrest. The Clantons tested this policy, and they paid for it. The Earps later claimed self-defense. Bean testified on behalf of the Clantons, saying that he witnessed Billy Clanton gunned down in cold blood after raising his hands and saying he didn't want to fight. Which side was telling the truth was never fully determined, and the reputations of both Bean and the Earps were damaged. Taking his cue from the real Sheriff Bean's testimony, Coon portrayed his Earps as cold-blooded killers. Further, following the example of the public record, the townspeople were shown as being split, some siding with the Clantons, others with the Earps. Kirk and company, perceived to be criminally violent in nature, are treated by the Melkotians in the same manner as the Clintons were by the Earps. These elements in this agenda were better realized in Coon's second draft from May 9th. Freiberger was happy with this version and immediately sent it to the Mimeo department to be retyped and formatted and designated as the May 10th yellow copy first draft, the final presentation of the original writer's work. Coon had fulfilled his contract and could now turn his attention to finishing Spock's brain. DeForest Kelley, for his part, was thrilled when he received his copy of the yellow draft script. At the time of the production, he said, quote, when I saw that script, I practically fell on the floor. Kelley, of course, had appeared in the 1955 presentation of Gunfight at the OK Corral on the CBS anthology series You Are There. And he also played Ike Clanton just 2 years later. He played Ike Clanton in the You Are There episode, but then 2 years later, he played Morgan Earp for the big screen version of the story. Oh, one of the stories. There have been so many stories about the OK Corral done. And now, a decade later, he was going to play Tom McLowry. Kelley said, quote, I thought, my God, I'm doing it again, but in space. In this, I was one of the McLowry brothers. Leonard was one of the brothers, and I was the other one. It was a situation that could have been funny, but nothing was ever done about it. But it struck me as funny. As Kelley soon learned, the emphasis was to avoid comedy, and a delicious plot point that Coon would certainly have used to further exploit the Spock-McCoy feud in Season 2 was ignored. William Shatner's first impression of the script by an unknown writer named Lee Cronin was not as positive as Kelley's. The writing seemed sloppy to him, and there were many inconsistencies and story holes. The last gunfight seemed like a work of a writer in a hurry. Shatner went straight to Roddenberry with his concerns. And Roddenberry wrote to Justman, quote, Dear Bob, I got a telephone call the other day from Bill Shatner, who, having read a yellow cover script of the last gunfight, was a little shaky about it. But I quickly and I think thoroughly assured him that Fred Freiberger was aware of the story problems and would clear them up. Roddenberry's primary reason for writing Justman, as the memo went on to say, was to suggest that the actors no longer be given anything but the final draft shooting script. He didn't want to have to deal with this sort of nuisance occurring again. Nimoy didn't bother Roddenberry. He wrote directly to Freiberger as a follow-up to a phone conversation they had. His letter in part read, quote, "Dear Fred, aside from the other problems discussed, to me it makes more sense that Spock would be trying to build a communicator or some kind of electronic signaling device rather than a phaser. I think that would be his primary aim. Which should be to get out of here rather than to win a fight, since we must accept that we can't do it. Can't win the fight, that is. If we continue to play the idea that we would win this fight, then we deny the whole premise, which is that we are the Clantons and we will lose in any fight. The others might be interested in maintaining the use of their weapons, while Spock points to the futility of weapons and trying to beat the history involved." As the rewriting progressed through a series of page revisions from Freiberger's typewriter, the script became even more surrealistic. Freiberger also chose not to slow his progress down with further memos from DeForest research concerning historical accuracy. The story itself offered a legitimate loophole in this area. The people and events of the tombstone we see are based on what Kirk and company believe they know, which by the nature of the story's theme must be distorted. Freiberg therefore took creative license as he rewrote Kuhn further and rewrote history as well. For the record, as Joan Pierce pointed out, Wyatt Earp was not the Marshal of Tombstone, which, that's how they've got him set up here in the episode. Where's, yeah, here we go. So they got him as the town marshal, but he wasn't the town marshal. He was marshal of the territory in Arizona that the town lay in. Now, his older brother Virgil was a city marshal, and Morgan was his deputy. Now, early in the episode, when they first meet Morgan Earp, Kirk refers to Morgan Earp as the man who kills on sight. But according to most historic records, Morgan Earp, by most accounts, was an even-tempered lawman who used his gun only when properly provoked. And Billy Claiborne, the role assigned to Chekhov, did in fact survive the OK Corral gunfight, as Spock tells Kirk. What Spock doesn't tell us is that Claiborne was not the only survivor. Ike Clanton also survived, and the gunfight took place at 3 p.m., not at 5 p.m. All right, so Vincent McAveety returned to direct his 6th and final episode of Star Trek. He was the logical choice, being one of Gunsmoke's most frequent directors, having directed a total of 45 episodes between 1965 and 1975. McAveety also had won the respect of the series producers with his first assignment, Balance of Terror. But with the exception of Patterns of Force, he always went over the 6-day shooting schedule. Because of this, the new management of Paramount Television was watching him closely. All right, now Ron Sobel was cast as Wyatt Earp. That's a good shot of him. There we go. Actually, I think, yeah, maybe that's better. He was 40. And he was a veteran of dozens of TV and film westerns, including multiple episodes of Rawhide, The Virginian, and Bonanza. In fact, immediately following doing this episode, his next acting assignment is he would play a small role in the 1969 John Wayne film True Grit. Now, Rex Holman played Morgan Earp. There he is. He was also 40. McAveety often cast Holman on Gunsmoke, where he appeared in 16 episodes. Holman also did 6 episodes for each for The Big Valley and The Virginian, and during the same period as this Star Trek episode, appeared in 4 episodes of The Guns of Will Sonnet. Now, here's one of the biggest surprises I've had doing these Star Trek episodes. So, this guy here, Rex Holman, he was actually in Star Trek 5. Let's see if I can find a good image here. That work? Yeah, here we go. So if you've seen Star Trek 5, let me bring this down here. And I'm going to share the screen. There we go. All right, so if you've seen Star Trek 5, I'm sure you recognize this guy. Now, the character's name is John, and he appears, he's got a big scene at the beginning of the movie where, he's digging these holes in the desert, and then Cybok confronts him and, then does the let me take away your pain bit and, release his pain, I guess, and all that. This guy is Rex Holman. This is the guy that played Virgil or Morgan Earp in the episode, and I had no idea that this was the same guy. I think he must be wearing some kind of prosthetics or something because he looks so different. I can't believe it's the same guy. Let me see if I can get a better close-up on him here. Yeah, maybe not. Maybe there. I guess maybe I could try that. Let's see. Yeah, no, that thing's too small. It's not going to work. Okay, but anyway, yeah, that shocked me when I read that this guy was actually in Star Trek 5. I had no idea. He looks so different, and he acts so different. He's a completely different character. Okay. Now, Charles Maxwell played Virgil Earp. And there's Virgil. He was 55, and he was another veteran of Westerns. On TV, just to name a few, he had appeared in 10 episodes of Bonanza, plus 4 episodes each of Gunsmoke, Rawhide, and Bat Masterson. Bill Zuckert, who played Sheriff Bean. There he is. He was 52. He also appeared often in Westerns, including multiple appearances on Death Valley Days, Bonanza, The Virginian, Here Come the Brides, and on Gunsmoke. And he worked on Gunsmoke with McAvity. Apparently, McAvity cast a lot of... wait, hold on. Do you guys see me? I'm getting a message that my... Hold on. Yeah? Okay. All right, I was getting a message that my screen was blocked or something, but it looks like it's okay. Okay. All right, so, all right, now Sam Gilman. But as I was saying, the director, McAvity, he, like I say, he did a lot of Westerns. It looked like he pulled a lot of actors that he had worked with on other Westerns to do this, which makes sense. Then, let's see. Now, I think, no. Trying to find the scene with Doc Holliday. Here we go. So Sam Gilman played Doc Holliday. He was 53. He had previously made a guest appearance actually on the TV series Life and Times of Wyatt Earp. And he was a regular for 1 year of the TV version of Shane, and had made multiple appearances on both Have Gun Will Travel and Gunsmoke. And I believe he was on Babylon 5 as well, I think. If you remember on Babylon 5 in it's the final episode of the 3rd season, right? When Sheridan goes to Zaha Doom. And, when he meets his wife again, and there's this old guy that he's talking to, who's like a spokesman for the Shadows, basically. I'm pretty sure that this is him. I'm pretty sure it's the same actor, because they look very similar. Okay, now Bonnie Beecher played Sylvia. There she is. She was 25 and had briefly been the girlfriend of Bob Dylan when they were both in college at the University of Minnesota. She had worked in TV since the early 60s, including appearing on a 2-part episode of Gunsmoke, as well as in other non-Western shows such as Peyton Place and The Fugitive. She would quit acting shortly after this to get married. She apparently married a guy who was big in the peace and anti-war protest movement. And I forget the guy's name. What is it? Hugh Romney. And this guy, Hugh Romney, he was actually the master of ceremonies at Woodstock at the concert. Charles Seal played Sam, the bartender. Or, I'm sorry, Ed the bartender, excuse me. There he is. He was 71. Seal was another character actor who suited Westerns well and had worked for John Ford in The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, Sergeant Rutledge, and Cheyenne Autumn. McAvity also liked Seal and had cast him in 19 episodes of Gunsmoke, in a role not dissimilar to this. Seal on Gunsmoke played Otis the bartender, often serving drinks, or also served drinks in Tombstone in several episodes of the late 50s Western series Tombstone Territory. And Ed McGreedy played the barber. Here we go. So that guy there in the middle. He was 38. He was another frequent guest player on Gunsmoke, thanks to McAvity. And on Star Trek, he had already appeared in Dagger of the Mind, where he was a Tantalus colony inmate who's tortured by the neural neutralizer. He appeared in Miri as the deformed boy creature who dies after grabbing his tricycle away from Dr. McCoy. He was in Patterns of Force, playing a Nazi sergeant, and also appeared in the Omega Glory, where he is the voice of Dr. Carter, the USS Exeter's chief medical officer, who dies after leaving a log entry about the Exeter becoming a plague ship. McAvity recalls, I had a major problem with that episode. That was one of only 2 times I can remember where I had to replace an actor. So Rex Holman was not the original choice to play Morgan Earp. He was originally cast in the role of Virgil. Let me go back here. Well, there they are. So Holman, he was originally going to play Virgil, and they cast another actor or McAvity cast another actor as Morgan. Now, they don't give his full name. They only refer to this guy in the book as Reese. His name was Reese. I don't know if that's his first or last name. But basically, he just he had impressed McAvity during his audition, but then when it came time to do the episode, the guy just couldn't do it. He just seemed to be clueless. And after just a few hours on set, he decided they had to replace him. So they fired him, basically, and then they had Holman take on the role of Morgan, and then they brought in this guy to play Virgil. The production notes from that day in 1968 read the following, quote, Director Vincent McAveety asked producers to replace an actor because of many delays and an inability to comprehend the scenes. It was learned from casting director Joe DaCosta that the actor had personal problems, which also affected his work. The producers decided to drop the actor from the production. The actor is to be paid the full amount of his contract. Due to recasting and retakes, the estimated production time lost was approximately 3 hours. This was a discreet way of stating the problem. McAveety, more candid when he was interviewed for this book in 2012, said, quote, the problem, in my opinion, was drugs. He was on drugs. I had him in a scene with Bill Shatner, and all he had to do was take a swing, and he had a couple of lines. Now, maybe this was something he'd never done, taking a swing at someone, but I had a stuntman there showing me exactly what to do and when to do it, and he still couldn't come close to doing it. He couldn't come up with the lines either. It was too bad. I spent a lot of time with him. I had him in my dressing room where I talked to him. I tried to reassure him that it's a TV show. It's not the end of the world. Let's just do it, But he just couldn't. He was on another planet. And I felt sorry for him because I loved his reading and he seemed like a real nice, dedicated guy and everything. But evidently he needed some help. That was his problem. This casting problem caused an unintended ripple effect. Instead of hiring another actor to play Reese's role as Morgan Earp, something else was considered. Rex Holman, the actor who signed to do the role, got a bit. Rex Holman said the actor who was signed on to do Morgan got a bit too temperamental, apparently, and Vincent McAveety fired him. So I went up a notch. There I was sitting in the wings, and I thought, oh, my career is going to sail. This is my big break. McAveety said, quote, it put a big demand on Rex, switching roles like that with no notice, but I'd worked with him a lot, and I knew he could do it. He was that good. But anyway, this wound up putting the production about a quarter of a day behind schedule. And remember, at this point, Paramount is watching the shooting schedule. They've got a real tight grip on the budget, and they're basically being told, you're only going to have like 6 days to do these. You're not going to go over, and there's no overtime on shooting days either. So basically, you got to get it done in the allotted time. Day 2 of production. The production notes from that morning read, quote, Rex Holman was recast in the role of Morgan Earp, and Charles Maxwell was hired today for the role of Virgil. And then first thing they did on the second day was reshoot some of the sequences from the first day. Quote, it was a strange situation, said Ron Sobel. Rex Holman, Charlie Maxwell, and I were hired to play the Earp Boys, and then Sam Gilman was hired to play Doc Holliday. When we read the script, at least speaking for myself, it really looked like somewhat of a dog. And when we showed up on the set, I saw the stylized buildings and so on and so forth, and it seemed to be even more of a dud. McAveety said the effects, the wind, the stylized sets, the fragmented sets, all make it feel like a stage play. It was kind of the kind of thing that takes a lot of imagination to relate to. And I agree with that. And I think that's, although we're spoiled by digital effects, and CGI and stuff like that, I do think it's caused people to basically not exercise their imagination as much. And, they're less willing to make that leap themselves and imagine what it would really look like, like say a shot of a spaceship or whatever. Instead, we just have it there for us. After the retakes were finished, the company moved on to the OK Corral set and began filming the climactic shootout. For this scene, Ron Sobel recalled how McAveety told him to play Wyatt Earp as if he were dead. Quote, I thought that was really strange direction, Sobel said. Actually, though, that simple suggestion turned out to be the key to my performance as Earp. The challenge was to animate this character enough so that he was as interesting, but at the same time, keep him unanimated. In the scene where I'm on my knees and William Shatner is going to shoot me, I'm using the dead image in my mind as an approach. And after this day, they were about 1 day or 1/2 day behind shooting schedule. Okay, and so it was McAveety's idea to have the shot where the crew are standing in front of a fence, and then the Earps fire at them, and then you see all these what appear to be bullets going through the fence. So it looks like the bullets are going right through them. And that sure impressed me when I was a kid. I remember thinking, whoa, the bullets are going right through them. And that was McAvee's idea on set. That was actually not in the script. Let's see. Okay. On day 4, on another part of stage 10, scenes were filmed in the barber shop, inside and outside of the marshal's office, and then onto the street outside the saloon. For the latter, as the Earps and Doc Holliday walked through a windstorm toward the OK Corral, McAvee's unexpected, unreal approach to filming continued. Ron Sobel said, Vincent McAvee, who was a very nice guy, juxtaposed our positions. It was all part of the design of the show to make it more of a surrealistic fantasy thing. And one cut, we are walking in one way in terms of our relationship to one another. And then in the next cut, for no reason at all, we were reversed, which didn't make a lot of sense to us, but it made a lot of sense to him. And like I say, I think this is maybe my favorite part of the episode, this sort of build up to the shootout. As they cut back and forth between the Earps gathering and the mine melds taking place, and the thunder and the lightning and the wind and everything. Like I say, it has a kind of Westworld or almost like a horror film feel to it. Let's see. Other than too much time and too much money spent, everyone associated with the series was happy with this kickoff episode for the 3rd season. Vincent McAvee was a hell of a creative director, Fred Freiberger said. I thought he did some wonderful things with it. Even with a compliment from the new man in charge, this would be McAvee's final Star Trek episode. He later said, quote, I liked Fred Freiberger a lot. I thought he was good. And I thought he liked me, but perhaps not, because it was not my choice to have that be my final episode for Star Trek. It wasn't Freiberger's choice either. Money or lack of it and pressure from Douglas Kramer's office at Paramount would be the deciding factor. Oh, yeah, because actually I skipped over something. I forgot. So on one day of shooting, Shatner showed up late. It was day 5. Yeah, so on day 5 of shooting, Shatner was actually about a half hour late to set. He said his alarm clock didn't go off, which maybe he just forgot to set it. Who knows? So obviously filming which was supposed to begin at 7:30, didn't begin until 8:20. So they lost nearly an hour there. And then also later during that same day, one of the cameras broke down and they had to replace it. And so with all that, it basically put them over a day behind shooting schedule. And Paramount, I guess, didn't like that. And so they would not bring him back to direct another episode. So Spectre of the Gun was the first episode produced for the new season and ushered in a new look for the series in 3 areas. The opening title sequence with the blue lettering, which I tried to reflect in my slides here. There you go. There was a tad more reverb in Shatner's voice in the intro and a new rendition of the theme song. And then also there was a change in costume, as mentioned in last week's stream. So for this season, they got rid of the velour uniforms and replaced them with polyester, which I do think look better. Definitely look better. But James Doohan's changed hairdo was not a good fit for Scotty. With his bangs neatly combed back, Doohan's facial features appeared harsher. Scotty, who could always lighten the mood, no longer seemed to be able to, even when trying, such as when he reacted to the taste of cheap bourbon or the sight of Chekhov being kissed by Sylvia. And I guess that's probably why they eventually go back to his old hairstyle. All right, so this episode aired on October 25th, 1968. And it was actually, I think, the 5th or 6th episode that aired for the season, even though it was the first one produced. So for this night, and again, they're on from 10 to 11 or from 9 to 10 Central Time on Friday nights now. And they got a 25% share of the audience. This put them in third place behind ABC with 27% and CBS with 31%. So for this night, and I guess going forward, they would be up against the Friday Night Movie on CBS, and then on ABC, the TV show Judd for the Defense. Let's see. It was a close race with only 2 percentage points separating Star Trek and Judd for the Defense, while the movie on CBS was only 3 percentage points above that, despite CBS paying a half-page ad and TV guide for its Friday night movie. The movie that night was 1964's Shock Treatment, starring Stuart Whitman, Lauren Bacall, Carol Lindley, and Roddy McDowall, all caught up in a suspense and murder in an insane asylum. On ABC's Judd for the Defense, Carl Bett and his hip young, and according to my partner, Carl Betts and his hip young partner, Ben, get an inside look in the pop rock biz while defending a music impresario on a murder charge. So I guess that was a legal drama of some kind. But as expected, the move to Friday night didn't do Star Trek any favors. Okay, so Fred Freiberger said, quote, I thought the show came out well, and that was the most satisfying considering that was my first episode of Star Trek. Jessman said, I felt strongly for that episode, and I thought it was one of the best of the third season, maybe the best of the third season. Regarding his third trip to the OK Corral, DeForest Kelley said, quote, in my career, I got to know that Tombstone Street pretty well. I got to the point where I felt as if I were having a recurring dream about it, just as McCoy does in that episode. There I'd be again walking to the confrontation, knowing it would turn out how it would turn out and playing a different character each time. Walter Koenig said, quote, anytime I got to do more than Warp Factor 2, Captain, was a highlight for me, and going to the planet and having an adventure was always one of the episodes I cherished. In fact, I'd say Spectre of the Gun was my favorite episode in which I actually participated because I did go to the planet. I got to wear a holster, had a gun, and got killed and got the girl and all that good stuff. So I felt very much part of the show and of the company on those occasions. James Doohan said, this was kind of interesting. I thought kind of fun and well done too. It's the only time Scotty does a mind meld with Spock. I tried to have Scotty, yeah, and I'd wondered about that during that scene. I was thinking, has he done a mind meld with Spock before? Because I didn't think he had. I tried to have Scotty look extremely creeped out by the thing. Nobody in their right mind wants to have somebody else in their head. Ron Sobel would have a change of heart about Vincent McAvee's bizarre approach to the surreal material, saying, quote, he was right because the show, in a very strange way, turned out to be one of the classic Star Trek episodes. Koenig added, quote, because our budget was particularly short on this particular episode, and rather than trying to conceal that we were only using storefronts and using facades, they integrated that into the show, and it gave a very eerie, otherworldly sense. And I thought the show stood out because of that, because that stylized approach they used. Vincent McAvee, however, had mixed feelings about his final Star Trek. He said, quote, it's interesting that what little fan mail I get in my life usually pertains to that episode. People love it, which I find hard to believe because I don't. Okay. All right, that'll wrap this one up. So next week, so this coming weekend, I'm going to have another drill with my National Guard units. So I'm not going to be able to do a Trek Talk next Tuesday. So that means the next one's going to be 2 weeks from now. And so 2 weeks from now, I will cover the episode Elan of Troyes. That'll be the next episode. And I do think I'll probably be on Earth's Mightiest Mondays again with my friends J-Man and Sean, covering another 3 issues of the original Avengers series. So I hope you'll show up for that. I want to thank everyone who showed up for the stream. Please do like the stream. I always forget to say that. Please do like the stream if you would. And thanks to Rogues1138, to Gwagnar for showing up. And I guess that'll be all for now. And I will see you guys all in 2 weeks, or well, actually on Monday, hopefully, this coming Monday. And I will see you all then, and have a good night.